They once filled every kitchen with the smell of hard work, pride, and survival. But today, the dinners that built the backbone of the 1970s working man have vanished without a trace. Why did we stop making the meals that carried a generation? And what did we lose when we did? Cheesy broccoli and rice casserole is a dish that may just be the ultimate comfort food. It's the kind of meal that fills the house with an irresistible aroma, combining the earthiness of broccoli, the warmth of rice, and the creamy richness of cheese. Its popularity skyrocketed in the 1960s, when casseroles became a go-to for busy families looking for easy, satisfying meals. The origin of this casserole can be traced back to the post-war era when convenience foods like canned soups and processed cheeses took center stage. The combination of broccoli and rice, often bound together with a can of creamy mushroom soup, was an affordable and filling way to stretch ingredients. Over time, home cooks started adding their own twists, incorporating cheddar cheese, garlic, and even a crunchy breadcrumb topping for texture. While it's easy to dismiss cheesy broccoli and rice casserole as just another side dish, it's also the type of meal that can easily steal the spotlight at dinner. It's a versatile dish, whether served alongside a roast chicken or as the main event for a meatless dinner. Cheesy broccoli and rice casserole is the ultimate kitchen hack. Tastes gourmet, takes no time, and leaves everyone smiling. It's the kind of dish that proves simplicity can be deliciously satisfying. Chicken fried steak. This classic is long gone but never forgotten. This one's pretty easy to make too. All you need is a chicken steak dredged in a seasoned flour mixture, dipped in a wet batter, and finally coated in a crispy breading. Fry till it's golden brown for the perfect dinner that'll leave you wanting more. Chicken fried steak is typically served with a creamy gravy for dipping, along with mashed potatoes and vegetables for a complete and oh-so-satisfying meal. It is basically American, and the yassified version of the Austrian dish Wiener Schnitzel, and the Italian dish cotoletta alla Milanese. Fancy names, but the same old fried chicken steak. Now I know what you're thinking. Why did this crispy golden goodness leave us too soon? Well, you can trick yourself all you want, but it's not the healthiest dinner out there. But hey, having a fried steak once in a while can't do much harm, right? Just be prepared for some finger-licking good action. This dish is messy, but in the best way possible. Few dishes command attention quite like a well-prepared crown roast. Traditionally served at homecoming dinners and holiday gatherings, it was the kind of dish that made guests stop and admire before the first bite. The ring of bone-in pork chops, arranged in a regal circle, was as much about presentation as it was about flavor. For families looking to impress without breaking the bank, the pork crown roast was a surprisingly economical choice. Pork was, and still is, one of the most affordable meats, and butchers often offered deals on bulk cuts. The apricot glaze, a key feature of this recipe, added just the right balance of sweetness and depth, while a bread-based stuffing packed the center for an even heartier meal. Preparing this dish took skill and patience. The roast had to be properly Frenched, tied, and slow-cooked to achieve that juicy, tender texture. But for many home cooks, the challenge was worth the reward. Unfortunately, as home butchering became a lost art and families shifted toward convenience meals, the crown roast started to disappear from dinner tables. The tasty meat pie isn't your average store-bought pie. We're talking about a savory masterpiece filled with delicious goodness. This used to be a classic at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners back in the day before hash brown casseroles came to take the cake. But tasty meat pies had their own beauty. Imagine a flaky, golden brown crust with a filling of seasoned ground meat, chopped vegetables like carrots and peas, and a rich, flavorful gravy. The origins of the meat pie have been traced back to the Neolithic period, around 6000 BC. Yeah, even the Egyptians were a fan of this classic. It's perfect for a potluck, a family dinner, or even a cozy night in. The best part? Its portability. Just grab a slice and head out the door. It's the ultimate dinner on the go. This creamy, savory casserole, ham tetrazzini with egg noodles, showcases how a few simple ingredients can be transformed into something truly special. While turkey tetrazzini is more commonly known, ham tetrazzini became a popular variation, especially for using up leftover holiday ham in a way that felt both indulgent and comforting. Named after Italian opera singer Luisa Tetrazzini, this dish originally featured chicken or turkey, often paired with a creamy sauce, mushrooms, and a variety of seasonings. The exact origin of ham tetrazzini is unclear, but the combination of a rich, buttery sauce and tender ham makes it a favorite for families seeking a hearty, filling meal. Egg noodles, thanks to their soft texture and ability to absorb sauces, are the perfect base for this casserole. When tossed with the ham and creamy sauce, they turn into a flavorful foundation that holds everything together. A sprinkle of Parmesan cheese on top before baking creates a golden, bubbly crust that takes the dish to another level. For decades, stuffed bell peppers were a staple of the American dinner table. They were practical, inexpensive, and packed with flavor. Families in the mid-20th century relied on simple, hearty meals, and this dish delivered. With just a few basic ingredients, ground beef, rice, tomatoes, and a well-seasoned filling, home cooks could create a meal that was both satisfying and visually appealing. Peppers were an accessible ingredient, easy to grow in backyard gardens and cheap at the store. Their natural shape made them the perfect edible container, eliminating the need for extra cookware. The filling, often stretched with rice to make the meat go further, was an economical way to feed a large family on a budget. Baked until tender, the peppers absorbed the savory juices, creating a dish that was both rustic and comforting. But as convenience foods took over, stuffed peppers began to fade from dinner rotations. The rise of prepackaged meals and fast food options meant fewer people were willing to spend time hollowing out peppers and slow-baking a homemade filling. Today, the dish still makes an occasional appearance in nostalgic cookbooks, but it's no longer a household staple. Lamb might seem like a fancy restaurant thing these days, but back in the day, it was a total dinnertime MVP. Lamb stew was a fan favorite at dinner parties back in the day, and I get the hype. Imagine the combination of melt-in-your-mouth lamb and an assortment of colorful vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and peas simmered in a rich, flavorful broth just begging to be soaked with some crusty bread. This is a dish that's guaranteed to warm you up from the inside out on a chilly day. Not to mention, it's surprisingly easy to make. Perfect for those nights when you want a delicious meal without spending hours in the kitchen. Just maybe don't tell your grandma you added a sprinkle of your favorite hot sauce. Some traditions are best left untouched. No dish says Sunday dinner like a pot roast simmering away, filling the house with the unmistakable aroma of comfort. Pot roast was an event, the centerpiece of countless family gatherings. Originating in France, pot au feu inspired what we now call pot roast, combining tougher cuts of beef with slow cooking to create something tender and flavorful. In America, the pot roast became a household favorite thanks to its practicality. Chuck roast, brisket, or round, these cuts weren't fancy, but with the magic of a Dutch oven or slow cooker, they transformed into melt-in-your-mouth perfection. Carrots, potatoes, and onions balanced the rich beef with earthy sweetness and hearty texture. The beauty of pot roast is its patience. It doesn't demand attention, just time. It's a dish that rewards you for slowing down, a rarity in today's grab-and-go world. As one home cook joked, it's the only dish that cooks itself while you're watching Sunday football. And we shall not forget the gravy, a pot roast's crowning glory. Thickened with pan drippings, it's the glue that holds this masterpiece together. If love had a flavor, pot roast might just be it. Before slow cookers and instant meals, there was fricassee, a dish that turned simple ingredients into something extraordinary. This creamy chicken stew had roots in European cooking, but became a homecoming dinner favorite in American kitchens, especially in the South and Midwest. It was rich, comforting, and made the most of what was available. Chicken fricassee was the perfect example of resourceful cooking. In the days when whole chickens were bought instead of pre-cut parts, every bit was used. The meat was gently simmered in a velvety sauce made from broth, butter, and cream, creating a dish that felt indulgent without being expensive. Paired with dumplings or rice, it was a filling meal that stretched to feed a crowd. What made fricassee special was its balance between rustic and refined. Unlike fried or roasted chicken, this method kept the meat exceptionally tender, absorbing the sauce's deep flavors. Some families added carrots and peas, while others preferred a touch of sherry for extra depth. But no matter the variation, it was a dish meant to be ladled generously and served with warm, crusty bread. So why did it disappear? As boneless, skinless chicken breasts became the norm, slow-cooked dishes like this fell out of favor. The tasty meat pie isn't your average store-bought pie. We're talking about a savory masterpiece filled with delicious goodness. This used to be a classic at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners back in the day before hash brown casseroles came to take the cake. But tasty meat pies had their own beauty. Imagine a flaky golden brown crust with a filling of seasoned ground meat, chopped vegetables like carrots and peas, and a rich, flavorful gravy. The origins of the meat pie have been traced back to the Neolithic period around 6000 BC. Yeah, even the Egyptians were a fan of this classic. It's perfect for a potluck, a family dinner, or even a cozy night in. The best part? Its portability. Just grab a slice and head out the door. It's the ultimate dinner on the go. Once a staple of dinner parties and homecoming feasts, this elegant yet simple side dish was a favorite among home cooks looking to add a touch of sophistication to their meals. Crisp, tender green beans, lightly sautéed in butter and finished with toasted almonds, struck the perfect balance between freshness and richness. Green beans were one of the most accessible vegetables in American kitchens. Whether fresh, frozen, or canned, they were affordable and widely available year-round. Almonds, though slightly more expensive, were used sparingly, adding a crunchy contrast without overwhelming the dish. The preparation was straightforward. The beans were quickly blanched to preserve their bright color and firm texture, then tossed in a buttery skillet with slivered almonds for a nutty, golden brown finish. Some recipes included a squeeze of lemon or a sprinkle of garlic for extra depth. But as convenience cooking took hold, green bean almondine slowly faded from dinner tables. Canned green bean casseroles, loaded with processed ingredients, became the new standard, and simple, fresh preparations were overlooked in favor of heavier, creamier alternatives. Swiss steak, a dish that's neither Swiss nor a steak, but somehow it has become a classic on American dinner tables. The name Swiss refers to the technique of Swissing, a process of tenderizing tougher cuts of beef like round steak by pounding or rolling it out. The result is a melt-in-your-mouth meal that feels far fancier than its humble beginnings. This dish gained popularity in mid-century America, when home cooks needed to stretch their budgets. By slow-cooking tenderized beef in a rich tomato-based sauce, the flavors could develop while turning inexpensive cuts into something extraordinary. Onions were essential, adding sweetness and depth to the tangy tomatoes. The result was a savory, satisfying dish perfect for ladling over mashed potatoes, rice, or even buttered noodles. Tomatoes, a key player in Swiss steak, were a practical choice. Canned tomatoes, first popularized in the early 1900s, made this dish accessible year-round. Who can resist the sight of those onions caramelizing in the skillet before being smothered in sauce? One could say Swiss steak is the Cinderella story of the food world. It starts tough, a little rough around the edges, but with a little care and time, it transforms into something utterly irresistible. Proof that sometimes slow and steady wins the race. Few side dishes could bridge the gap between savory and sweet as effortlessly as corn pudding. A staple of Southern and Midwestern homecoming dinners, this dish combined farm-fresh simplicity with a rich, custard-like texture. Families often served it alongside roasted meats or holiday spreads, where its golden hue and delicate sweetness made it a comforting favorite. Whether fresh off the cob in the summer or canned in colder months, it was inexpensive and widely available. This recipe used basic pantry staples, butter, milk, eggs, and a touch of sugar, to create a dish that felt indulgent despite its humble ingredients. Baking was the preferred method, allowing the custard to set while keeping the kernels tender. Some families swore by a cast-iron skillet, while others used deep casserole dishes to achieve that perfect golden crust. Recipes varied. Some included a splash of vanilla, others added a pinch of nutmeg. But the result was always a creamy, spoonable side that paired with almost anything. As processed cornbread mixes and quick-fix alternatives took over, traditional corn pudding was left behind. But for those who remember its warm, velvety bite, it's a dish worth bringing back. So chicken paprikash is a Hungarian dish that sounds fancy, but is basically a party in a pot for your taste buds. Imagine juicy chicken pieces slow-cooked with tender onions in a creamy sauce bursting with the warm, smoky flavor of paprika. It's served with a side of fluffy rice or noodles. Chicken paprikash really found its footing back when Chinese takeout wasn't as big of a thing. You know, back when Grandma used to put on the apron and cook for us? This dish really was the one-pot wonder. Bonus points. If your grandma used to whip this up for you, that nostalgia factor is real. A version of it still exists in Bulgarian cuisine in case you crave the it now. The Bulgarians are a little light on the paprika and center the dish on sautéed onions. Okay, creamed spinach and pearl onions didn't look the most appetizing, but trust me, it was always a hit at family dinners. Think of a rich, creamy base packed with vibrant green spinach leaves. And let's not forget the star of the show, pearl onions, that added the perfect touch of sweetness. Not only was this dinner finger-licking delicious, but it was healthy too. Jam-packed with nutrients including vitamins A, C, and K, iron, folate, potassium, and a good amount of fiber. Just don't blame me if you get flashbacks to your school cafeteria. But hey, sometimes those cafeteria classics deserve a second chance, especially when they're this delicious and healthy all at the same time. Similarly enough, people were having a lot of fun with all the different things you could do with celery. You could braise your celery with potatoes to have something resembling a home-cooked meal. It would often work too. Your knowledge of the Dust Bowl may be about its ecological extremes though. I mean, it felt like that little chunk of the planet was throwing a generational hissy fit. What people did to cope with the trifecta of war, economic breakdown, and ecological disaster was a lot more interesting, at least to me, and hopefully to you too. Do you remember how I keep mentioning those backyard gardens people had? They were known as victory gardens, and the basic idea was to basically begin farming and planting crops on whatever fertile soil you had. Since potatoes were such an easy crop to grow, and since they could last in almost every kind of environment, it became really common for people to grow potatoes along with celery in these gardens. The end result was always a dish like braised celery and potatoes or mashed potatoes alongside celery, or a stew or broth. It was pretty efficient, and it would also double as trade for people, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the next potato-based item. Hamburger hash is the unsung hero of the frugal kitchen. Born out of necessity and ingenuity, this dish has been rescuing leftovers and stretching budgets for decades. The concept is simple: ground beef, diced potatoes, and onions cooked together in a skillet. But its simplicity is exactly what makes it timeless. The origins of hash can be traced to the 17th century, when the term came from the French word hacher, meaning to chop. In America, it evolved into a practical way to repurpose leftover meats. By the 20th century, hamburger hash became a staple in many households, particularly during tough economic times, when every ingredient had to count. Potatoes were the perfect partner, cheap, filling, and versatile. Onions, meanwhile, brought a touch of sweetness to balance the savory beef. Some cooks added a sprinkle of paprika or a dash of Worcestershire sauce for an extra punch of flavor. While it may not have the glamour of a Sunday roast, hamburger hash had one major advantage. It came together fast, a blessing on busy weeknights. Hamburger hash proves that even leftovers can shine, especially if you fry them just right. It's a humble dish with a big heart, reminding us that great meals don't need complicated recipes. For families stretching their grocery budget, few meals delivered as much flavor and comfort as these unusual-looking meatballs. A product of the Great Depression and wartime rationing, Porcupine meatballs were a creative way to make ground beef go further. Mixing rice into the meat wasn't just for texture. It bulked up the meal, making a pound of beef feed more mouths. Rice was an affordable pantry staple, and when the meatballs simmered in a tangy tomato sauce, the grains softened and expanded, giving them their signature spiky appearance. Despite the name, No porcupines were harmed in the making of this dish. Just a bit of kitchen ingenuity at work. Some recipes used canned tomato soup for a mild, creamy sauce, while others relied on crushed tomatoes and Worcestershire sauce for a sharper kick. Either way, the slow cooking process allowed the flavors to meld into a hearty, stick-to-your-ribs meal. For decades, this dish was a go-to for busy home cooks. It was easy, required minimal ingredients, and could be made in one pot, ideal for feeding a growing family. But as convenience foods and pre-made meatballs filled grocery store freezers, the homemade version started to disappear. Now, Swiss steak is like a warm hug from the past. This dish is all about slow-cooked, fall-apart tender beef bathed in a tangy tomato sauce. Think slow cooker vibes, but way before slow cookers were even a thing. Now, the Swiss steak is all about patience. The longer you simmer the beef, the more melt-in-your-mouth delicious it becomes. It's also the perfect way to use up that tougher cut of meat you accidentally grabbed at the store. If you grew up thinking this dish was from Switzerland, as the name suggests, now would be a good time for me to tell you your whole life was a lie. This technique of cooking up tender meat came from England, so they're the ones to thank for this meaty goodness. I can just imagine the satisfying experience of cutting through that tender beef with minimal effort. Swiss steak, a dinner-time classic that deserves a comeback. Where do I sign the petition? So we're going to go up to the upper-class side of things for a bit. This wasn't a dish that anyone else could have afforded to make or eat back then anyway. Homemade gnocchi with noodles was still something that the relatively well-off and affluent families in the States were able to eat, and it was entirely something limited to certain parts of big urban hubs like Chicago, New York, and Washington. Gnocchi is an Italian dish, which I'm sure you already know. What's interesting is that it actually came on over to the States thanks to Italian immigrants, and back then, it hadn't become the fine dining appetizer that it's known to be today. It wasn't exactly that pricey either. Back then, Italian communities full of immigrants were still making it whenever they could. For the gnocchi, all you would need is flour, water, and dough. These were things that were out of the reach of normal people, sure, but to people with generational wealth? Well, it was mostly business as usual. Don't get me wrong, even though they were impacted by the recession and the Dust Bowl, there wasn't a single American home that wasn't. Did they draw the short end of the stick, though? Not by a long shot. This wasn't a dish you'd see anywhere outside of real bougie neighborhoods. Pork chops with scalloped potatoes was a duo so perfectly matched, it's as if they were destined to share the same plate. This meal became a dinner-time favorite for its balance of simplicity and satisfaction. Tender, pan-seared pork chops alongside creamy, cheesy potatoes. It's no wonder it earned its spot in the hearts and stomachs of families everywhere. The secret to scalloped potatoes lies in their layers. Thinly sliced potatoes are smothered in a rich, velvety sauce made from milk or cream, often with a touch of cheese, and baked until golden and bubbling. The dish likely evolved from French gratin dauphinois, but American cooks put their own spin on it by using cheese more liberally. Pork chops, on the other hand, have always been a practical choice for home cooks. Affordable and quick to prepare, they pair perfectly with the creamy potatoes, creating a meal that's hearty yet approachable. To many, the crispy edges of the potatoes and the seared crust on the pork chops were the best part. This meal is like a warm hug in casserole form. The only downside is that it's impossible to stop at just one serving. And really, who would want to? Some of the best dishes come from necessity, and few ingredients are as dependable as potatoes. For generations, scalloped potatoes were a staple at homecoming dinners, potlucks, and Sunday feasts. Thinly sliced and baked in a rich, velvety sauce, they were a testament to the idea that simple ingredients, when treated right, could feel downright luxurious. Potatoes were the backbone of many American kitchens. They were cheap, easy to store, and could feed an entire family without much effort. The addition of a creamy sauce, made from milk, butter, and a touch of garlic, elevated this humble dish into something special. Some versions kept it simple, while others included layers of cheese, turning it into a gooey, golden masterpiece. Either way, it was a comforting, belly-filling side that paired well with just about any main course. The cooking process required patience. Proper scalloped potatoes weren't rushed. Each layer had to absorb the sauce, and the top needed time to develop that perfect golden crust. But as boxed potato mixes and instant gratins took over, homemade scalloped potatoes started to fade from dinner tables. The Hungarians really killed it with dinners that shaped our childhood, because we've got another banger on the list. Hungarian goulash was everyone's favorite cozy hearty meal back in the day. Goulash is a hearty stew whipped up with tender chunks of beef simmered in a rich, savory sauce brimming with paprika. Yeah, paprika was huge back in the day. So why did this delicious dinner vanish from our dinner tables? Well, the Hungarian goulash traces back as far as the 10th century to stews eaten by the shepherds, so you can say this one might just have run its course. But hey, if you're ever craving goulash, dust off some old cookbooks and get to work because it really isn't hard to wump up. This is the perfect dish for a chilly night in, curled up on the couch with a good movie. Just be careful not to spill it on your mom's vintage tablecloth. Those things are irreplaceable. Swiss chard is a leafy green we don't hear too much about anymore, and that was the case back then too. I don't blame people, since its glory days were definitely before the 20th century. But people remembered this little green once again during the Dust Bowl. People would pair this up with white bean soup, which was something that the masses found it very hard to live without. Why? They were a fabulous source of protein, they are affordable, you could even forage them, and these could actually be stored for months. This was a time where people were desperate for protein, by the way. A lot of good cuts of meat were more expensive than ever, and just out of the reach of most common people, while a lot of other kinds of things like nuts and almonds just weren't filling you up enough for the amount of money or time it would take to get enough of them. You had to be really smart with every cent, so people would go for things like white bean soup with Swiss chard. This was a versatile combination that had every pro health-wise on top of being something that could feed the entire family and be made with minimal effort. Few meals capture the essence of Southern cooking like fried chicken with cornbread and collard greens. Each component has a rich history that has shaped American culinary traditions, and together they create a trifecta of flavor, texture, and nostalgia. Fried chicken, with its golden, crispy crust and tender interior, dates back centuries. European immigrants brought the concept of frying poultry, but it was African-American cooks in the South who perfected the technique, seasoning the chicken and frying it in cast-iron skillets. By the mid-20th century, it was a Sunday staple, served to mark special occasions or simply as a reward for the week's hard work. Cornbread, meanwhile, is a true American original, rooted in Native American cooking. Made with cornmeal, it became a Southern classic for its simplicity and versatility. Whether sweetened with a touch of honey or served savory, it's the ideal partner for soaking up juices from the chicken or a splash of hot sauce. And then there are the collard greens, slow-cooked with a bit of pork or bacon fat for a smoky, hearty flavor. Rich in vitamins, they're proof that comfort food can also be nutritious. Remember when your mom used to whip you up lunch for school along with a heartfelt note and a sweet treat? Meat and potato patties were a staple back in the day and a hit in the lunchbox. If you've got some leftover mashed potatoes lying around, you've got to try these. Yeah, these are basically patties made out of mashed potatoes combined with seasoned ground meat, shaped into little discs, and fried till golden brown. They pair perfectly with ketchup, your favorite dipping sauce, or even a dollop of sour cream for a tangy twist. Meat and potato patties are the ultimate finger food that is still a hit to this day. Well, with McDonald's French fries on the rise, these really don't make an appearance that often, but you can whip these patties up anytime. They're surprisingly easy to make. Just give your mom a call and ask for the recipe. Potato and chickpea curry with rice was a really good combination that was pretty much built for the environment people were finding themselves in the Dust Bowl. The recipe changed with each different area and state, but for the most part, the core mix of potatoes, dried peas, and rice was the same. People would substitute white rice with brown rice wherever they could because the latter was cheaper, and it made sense to stretch your pantries out as much as you possibly could. Potatoes, especially, were a rock-solid friend to rely on for the American people. They were one of the easiest things you could possibly grow. You could make so many things perfect for a large number of people with them, and they were full of health benefits. A side bonus was that they'd really keep you full, but all this should give you an idea. It was almost impossible to exist without having a good stock of potatoes in your root basement. Onions, garlic, A water-based broth and just thyme and salt pepper were used for the curry. Pretty bare bones, right? Yet to them, that was still a phenomenal dish to come home to. Turkey and gravy, traditionally a centerpiece of Thanksgiving but often enjoyed beyond the holiday season, holds a special place in American culinary history. Its pairing with mashed turnips, though less common today, harkens back to a time when root vegetables were staples in kitchens for their affordability and long storage life. Turkey has been an American icon since colonial days. Benjamin Franklin famously praised the bird, calling it a much more respectable bird than the bald eagle. While roasting turkey might be associated with grand feasts, smaller versions, like turkey breasts, frequently appeared on mid-century dinner tables, making the meal more practical for everyday cooking. The star of the plate, next to the turkey, is the gravy. Made from the drippings left in the pan, it's rich, savory, and ties everything together. A good gravy, as some would say, can salvage even a dry turkey. Often overshadowed by mashed potatoes, turnips were a go-to side dish in earlier generations. Packed with nutrients and a slightly peppery flavor, they offered a lighter, unique alternative to spuds. Mashed with butter, cream, or even a touch of maple syrup, they brought earthy warmth to the plate. If turkey is the headliner, gravy is the conductor. And turnips? They're the backup singers you never knew you needed. A harmonious meal indeed. Slow cooking was once a necessity, not a luxury. Before pressure cookers and pre-packaged meals, tougher cuts of beef were transformed through hours of gentle simmering, unlocking deep, rich flavors. This smoky chipotle beef ragu was one such dish, a meal that took time but rewarded patience with melt-in-your-mouth tenderness. Chipotle peppers, known for their earthy heat, were a staple in traditional Mexican and Southwestern cooking, but by the mid-20th century, their smoky kick found its way into American kitchens. Paired with tomatoes, garlic, and slow-braised beef, this dish delivered a bold, layered flavor that stood apart from ordinary pot roasts. Served over creamy polenta or even buttered noodles, it was both comforting and deeply satisfying. Despite its rich taste, this meal was surprisingly budget-friendly. Beef chuck or brisket, once some of the most affordable cuts, became tender and flavorful when cooked low and slow. The sauce was built from pantry staples, making it an easy, accessible choice for home cooks. But over time, as quick weeknight meals took priority and polenta lost ground to pasta and rice, this dish faded from dinner tables. Today, chipotle has seen a resurgence in trendy restaurants, but this home-style beef ragu remains a forgotten classic. Scalloped chicken casserole. Here's another classic casserole that deserves a comeback. This dish is the perfect example of simple but mouth-watering good. I mean, just imagine tender chicken pieces in a creamy sauce, seasoned to perfection, and layered with fluffy breadcrumbs. I think I'm feeling hungry now. Scalloped chicken casserole is a great way to use up leftover chicken, and it's perfect for a quick and easy weeknight meal. Not to mention, it's a dish that's sure to please even the pickiest eaters. Who can resist creamy chicken and crispy breadcrumbs? Ditch your takeout menus for a night and take a trip down memory lane by giving this casserole a try. You can find dozens of recipes on the internet, and it won't take you hours to whip up. Trust me, your taste buds will thank you. One of the other things that was pushed to the mainstream thanks to the Dust Bowl was the reliance on one-pot meals. Stuff like vegetable pot pie with a biscuit crust really made the rounds just about everywhere. It was because it was so easy to pool together different kinds of vegetables to make one massive serving of pot pie, oftentimes more than just for a family. People would basically realize this. If they shared the amount of vegetables and resources they had, they could honestly make a lot more. Community-based ingredient sharing and food preparation once again became a thing. Entire neighborhoods were once again eating together, and it was a big part of how people managed to survive. This pot pie was a one-stop solution to massive amounts of hunger, and often people would throw in whatever kind of vegetables they had in there. This would typically look like your average mix of cabbage, onions, garlic, tomatoes, potatoes, and the rest, but people would try to add in aromatics to get some flavor going too. It was little stuff like this that really helped keep things together for everyone because, on their own, People didn't have the energy to cook big meals like this very often. A staple of potlucks, homecoming dinners, and weeknight meals, this creamy, cheesy bake was the ultimate comfort food. With its simple ingredients and easy preparation, cheddar broccoli rice bake became a go-to for busy home cooks looking to feed a crowd on a budget. Rice was one of the most affordable pantry staples, stretching meals and adding heartiness without costing much. Broccoli, whether fresh or frozen, provided a touch of green and a hint of nutrition. But the real star was the cheese sauce, a rich, velvety mixture made with cheddar, milk, and often a can of condensed soup for convenience. Some variations added a crunchy topping like buttered breadcrumbs or crushed crackers for an extra layer of texture. This dish thrived in the 1970s and 80s when casseroles dominated American kitchens. But as fresh vegetables and from-scratch cooking made a comeback, cream-based bakes fell out of favor. The rise of quick, microwavable sides also played a role. Why spend time layering and baking when a bag of steamed broccoli and instant rice could be ready in minutes? For those who grew up with its bubbling, cheesy goodness straight from the oven, this classic deserves a second look. Roast chicken with stuffing and green beans is a meal that evokes family gatherings, holidays, and a sense of home. This classic dinner has long been a centerpiece of American dining, combining practicality with elegance. Roasting chicken is one of the oldest cooking methods, but by the 20th century, it became a weekly tradition for many households. Chickens were relatively inexpensive, easy to prepare, and, if seasoned and roasted just right, deliciously satisfying. The key to a perfect roast chicken lies in the balance: crispy, golden skin on the outside and juicy, flavorful meat inside. Stuffing or dressing, depending on your regional preference, traces back to ancient Rome. By the time it reached American kitchens, cooks used bread cubes, herbs, and sometimes vegetables to create the savory, aromatic side we know today. While traditionally cooked inside the bird, many began baking it separately for a crispier texture, what some might call progress. Green beans complete this trio, often sautéed with garlic, almonds, or a touch of bacon. They brought a fresh, vibrant contrast to the richness of the chicken and stuffing. If you roast a chicken and make stuffing, you're not just making dinner, you're making memories. And for anyone who's ever had the leftovers, the memories taste just as good the next day. So if you go on over to the African American community during this time, especially in the rural South, then you'll find that a lot of them were introducing Americans to something new. Black-eyed peas and collard greens were a traditional pairing that was passed down in their community for ages, and it really pulled its weight for everyone throughout the Depression. Before all this mess had started, people weren't really too aware about the benefits of a black-eyed pea or how easy it was to grow. In fact, beyond navy and pinto beans, the average American didn't really think about what else was out there. Maybe the occasional split pea, but that's it. Collard greens still had a lot more of a reputation for being a super healthy dish you should always be eating. But it was hard to get the kids onto that kind of food. The hunger that most people would experience would push people out of their bubbles and have them eating anything available, though. Black-eyed peas were still one of the easiest things to grow, and it was especially popular throughout African American communities, even more so than usual. They had always made a lot of these, but now they were living by it too. Back in the 1950s, the Divan Parisian restaurant at Chatham Hotel in New York City gave birth to its signature dish, the chicken Divan casserole. This mouth-watering dish soon found its way to all our homes, and I'm not complaining. It's made of tender chicken pieces nestled amongst vibrant green broccoli florets in a rich and creamy sauce, topped with a generous layer of melty cheese and a sprinkle of crispy breadcrumbs. The chef who leaked this recipe out to the public really took one for the team, and we can never thank him enough. It's the perfect combination of protein, veggies, and all the cheesy goodness your heart desires. Just maybe pair it with a side salad to pretend you're being healthy. Chicken Divan casserole is the retro dish of every cheese lover's dreams, and you know what that calls for? A comeback. It's a classic at throwback parties, but you don't really need an excuse to cook this up. A typical Tuesday night works too. With a name that evokes a French bistro and a flavor that feels like home-cooked comfort, chicken fricassee bridges the gap between elegance and nostalgia. This classic combines tender chicken with a creamy, flavorful sauce and an assortment of vegetables. The roots of chicken fricassee lie in French cuisine, with the term fricassee appearing as early as the 15th century. What sets it apart is the technique. Chicken pieces are first browned lightly, then simmered slowly in a sauce that often blends broth, cream, and a touch of white wine. Julia Child famously described it as halfway between a sauté and a stew, and if Julia said it, it must be true. Vegetables like carrots, celery, mushrooms, and pearl onions elevate the dish, adding texture and natural sweetness to complement the savory chicken. In many American households, this meal became a way to transform humble ingredients into something elegant. While its name might sound intimidating, chicken fricassee is surprisingly practical. It's one pot, easy to make, and the leftovers taste even better the next day, if they survive that long. Fricassee is the dish that makes you feel like you've been to Paris, even if your passport expired decades ago. There was a time when Sunday dinner wasn't complete without a plate of slow-cooked, gravy-drenched pork chops. Smothered in rich, savory onion gravy and served alongside a heaping portion of mashed potatoes, this dish was a cornerstone of Southern home cooking. It was an experience, one that filled the kitchen with the unmistakable aroma of comfort. Pork was an affordable alternative to beef, making it a practical choice for families looking to stretch their grocery budget. Bone-in chops were particularly popular, as they were both flavorful and inexpensive. The slow cooking process allowed even the toughest cuts to become fork tender, absorbing the deep, savory notes of the seasoned gravy. Some cooks swore by a cast-iron skillet, while others let the dish simmer in a slow cooker for hours, ensuring the pork melted in your mouth. But as convenience foods and boneless, skinless meats took over the supermarket, this dish began to disappear. Quick-fix dinners replaced slow-simmered meals, and thick homemade gravies gave way to powdered mixes and canned alternatives. Today, smothered pork chops are a rare sight at the dinner table, but for those who remember the first bite of a perfectly tender chop covered in rich, peppery gravy, it's a dish worth revisiting. The Dust Bowl was hardship personified. Things like lentil and kale stew were honestly very necessary for the overall survival of people. Hearty greens like that would last, could resist the extreme weather and environment, and were most of all really nutritious. This was a time where you wanted to eat just about anything that strengthened your immune system. It wasn't just the lack of good food that was making it easier for people to get sick, it was also the lack of access to health care. People couldn't afford doctors, and the worst of the Dust Bowl hit all of the slums and rural areas that occupy the outskirts of so many states. This meant that a lot of lower and working-class people regularly just ate so that the chances of getting sick were less and less, though despite their best efforts, they would eventually fall sick as well. Lentil and kale stew is as super as a food can get, and I mean that in every sense, but it's not an end-all be-all. What it is, though, is a very hearty stew that works great around the winter months for an entire family. You could spin this around a few different ways for variety, and it would still work. But the kids definitely had a tough time getting used to something like this. Can't really blame them either. I'm an adult, and I still struggle with kale. Stuffed peppers. Forget those boring pre-made things you see at the grocery store because stuffed peppers are here to save the day. We're talking about the beautiful bell peppers Grandma made on Thanksgiving. Vibrant red, yellow, or orange peppers are hand-picked and carefully hollowed out and then stuffed with a flavorful mixture of fluffy rice, seasoned ground meat, and your choice of chopped vegetables. Once stuffed, these peppers are baked to perfection until they are tender and crisp. Now, this isn't just a casual meal. Whipping up a stuffed pepper might make you feel like a master chef in the kitchen. It's also a great way to use up leftover rice and ground meat. Bonus points. If you use their visual appeal to trick your children into getting their daily dose of veggies. Yeah, the little ones don't really go for the green peppers on the table, but they might just love these stuffed peppers. You might even add some cheese to top it off. Unfortunately, it is one of those dishes that has faded from many dinner tables. Spaghetti with meatballs and garlic bread is an iconic meal that combines Italian tradition with American innovation. While pasta with tomato sauce has roots deep in Italian cuisine, The pairing of spaghetti with meatballs became popular in the United States in the early 20th century, thanks to Italian immigrants looking to recreate familiar dishes in a new land. The meatball itself is believed to have evolved from a mix of ground meats, herbs, and breadcrumbs, often made from leftovers. In Italy, smaller meatballs were served as part of a larger meal, but when Italian-American cooks began to serve them as a standalone dish, they became the hearty centerpiece of spaghetti dinners. The combination of savory meatballs, tomato sauce, and long strands of spaghetti soon became synonymous with comfort and family meals. No spaghetti dinner would be complete without garlic bread. While garlic bread wasn't traditionally Italian, it quickly became a staple in American Italian cuisine. The golden, crispy texture of the bread, combined with the rich garlic butter, complements the pasta perfectly. Leftover turkey was once the foundation of creative home cooking. Long before frozen dinners and deli slices, resourceful cooks found ways to repurpose every part of a roasted bird. One of the most inventive solutions? A golden, bubbling gratin that transformed shredded turkey into something just as satisfying as the holiday feast itself. Sweet potatoes, naturally rich and slightly sweet, paired perfectly with the savory depth of turkey. Thinly sliced and layered, they acted as both a starch and a built-in flavor enhancer. A cheesy herbed cream sauce seeped into every bite, bringing a velvety richness that made this dish feel indulgent despite its humble origins. Some families added a pinch of nutmeg for warmth, while others topped it with breadcrumbs for a golden, crispy finish. For decades, this dish was a practical way to extend a meal and avoid food waste. Turkey was affordable, especially in the days when whole birds were purchased rather than prepackaged cuts. Sweet potatoes, widely available and inexpensive, provided both nutrition and flavor. As quick-fix meals and processed leftovers became the norm, dishes requiring careful layering and slow baking lost their appeal. With roots in Southern cooking, smothered chicken with onions and gravy is the perfect blend of crispy chicken, tender onions, and rich gravy that makes you want to go back for seconds, and maybe even thirds. Smothering food, whether it's chicken, pork chops, or beef, is an iconic Southern technique. The term smothered refers to cooking the meat slowly in its own juices or a flavorful sauce, often with onions or bell peppers, until it's tender and full of flavor. For this dish, the chicken is first browned to achieve a crispy golden skin before being smothered in sautéed onions and a gravy made from pan drippings. The result is a plate of food that's pure comfort. Gravy, of course, is the magic behind smothered chicken. Made from the fond left in the pan after frying, it's rich and savory, sometimes thickened with flour or cornstarch and seasoned to perfection. And those onions caramelize beautifully, adding sweetness and depth to every bite. Smothered chicken is like a hug on a plate, if that hug could also be crispy and covered in gravy. It's a dish that brings people to the table, no matter the occasion. Hear me out, this one might sound a little boring at first glance, but trust me, it's a classic for a reason. The split pea soup is a hearty, filling, and surprisingly healthy-ish, thick, creamy soup packed with vibrant green split peas and other vegetables like carrots, celery, and onions. Now, on that healthy-ish claim, it depends on how much butter and cream your grandma used. The split pea soup is the kind of soup that leaves you feeling satisfied for hours. It has been a St. Patrick's Day staple ever since its origin in 1905. The best part? You can totally customize it according to your liking. Yeah, don't be shy to throw in your favorite veggies, add a splash of lemon juice for a bit of brightness, or even some leftover shredded chicken for an extra protein punch. We really need to bring this one back. Before plant-based eating became trendy, hearty vegetarian dishes like this one were a practical necessity. Creamy wild rice and mushroom casserole was a staple in Midwestern and Northern kitchens, especially during the colder months. Packed with earthy flavors and a rich, velvety texture, it was a comforting dish that felt just as satisfying as any meat-based meal. Wild rice, despite its name, isn't actually rice. It's a highly nutritious aquatic grain native to North America. Indigenous tribes harvested it for centuries, and by the mid-20th century, it had found its way into everyday cooking. Though slightly more expensive than white rice, its nutty flavor and chewy texture made it worth the price. Combined with mushrooms, one of the most affordable and widely available vegetables, this dish was both economical and deeply flavorful. A creamy sauce, often made with milk, butter, and a touch of sherry, tied everything together, creating a casserole that was rich yet wholesome. As convenience foods surged in popularity, canned cream of anything soup replaced homemade sauces, and wild rice was increasingly swapped for cheaper, quicker-cooking grains. Over time, this once-loved casserole became a relic of an era when scratch cooking was the norm. Tamale pie is an American dish that brings together the heartiness of ground beef, the comfort of a cornmeal topping, and a blend of savory seasonings that make it a family favorite. While the name might suggest a traditional tamale, tamale pie is actually a casserole that layers these ingredients for a meal that's both satisfying and easy to make. The dish likely has its roots in the Southwest, where tamales have been a staple in Mexican cuisine for centuries. However, tamale pie emerged in the United States in the mid-20th century as a more accessible version, taking the flavors of tamales and turning them into a bake. Ground beef is browned with onions, garlic, and chili powder, then topped with a cornmeal batter and baked until golden. The result is a savory pie with a cornmeal crust that mimics the texture of a tamale. Tamale pie quickly became a favorite for home cooks thanks to its simplicity and versatility. It could be customized with ingredients like cheese, olives, or even jalapenos to suit personal tastes. Some families served it with a side of cornbread or a dollop of sour cream for extra richness. Tamale pie is proof that you don't need a fancy tamale press to make a meal that's full of flavor. Simple, hearty, and always a crowd pleaser. So, the cabbage was really similar. Basically, during the Dust Bowl, it was mostly a competition of how fast you could grow something and how conveniently you could do it. People weren't bothering with anything that took more effort than it was worth or didn't give immediate results. And honestly, I completely get them. Why would you waste your time on crops that are inherently difficult to grow when even the easy ones are going through so much crop failure? Cabbage was one of those easy-to-grow plants, and it became a national savior for lots of people. Cabbage stir-fry with onions and garlic was something people could enjoy every other day, as most of the core ingredients were things they had already been growing in their backyard gardens or preserving for a long while. At this point, the average American person is still used to keeping their experience with cabbage to just burgers, but the Dust Bowl pushed everyone out of their comfort zone just for the sake of survival. Once a staple of working-class kitchens, this hearty one-dish meal was built on the kind of ingredients that stretched a family's budget without sacrificing flavor. Cabbage, potatoes, and smoked sausage, three of the most economical and widely available foods, came together in layers, baked slowly in a rich mustard cream sauce. The result was a rustic, deeply satisfying dish that filled bellies and kept families warm through colder months. Cabbage was a practical ingredient, valued for its long shelf life and versatility. When paired with smoky seasoned sausage and starchy potatoes, it created a meal that was both inexpensive and packed with flavor. The mustard-infused cream sauce added a tangy richness, tying everything together. Some home cooks added a dash of vinegar for brightness, while others incorporated cheese for extra indulgence. No matter the variation, this dish was proof that humble ingredients could create something truly special. Why did it fall out of favor? The rise of prepackaged meals and low-carb trends made cabbage-heavy dishes less common, and as quick stovetop meals replaced slow-baked casseroles, this once popular dish faded from view. Bright, tangy, and effortlessly elegant lemon chicken piccata was once a dinner table favorite. With its delicate balance of citrus, butter, and briny capers, this dish turned simple ingredients into something refined. Italian-American families popularized it in mid-century kitchens, and by the 1960s, it had become a go-to recipe for home cooks looking to add a touch of sophistication to a weeknight meal. Chicken was an economical protein, but before boneless, skinless cuts were widely available, whole birds had to be broken down by hand. Piccata was traditionally made with thinly pounded chicken breasts, quickly dredged in flour and sautéed until golden. The sauce was the star. Fresh lemon juice and capers combined with a silky butter reduction to create a dish that was light yet deeply flavorful. It was often served with pasta or rice, making it both practical and satisfying. So why did this dish vanish from home kitchens? Over time, complex flavors gave way to simpler, more standardized meals. The rise of processed sauces and pre-made chicken dishes made from scratch piccata seemed like more effort than it was worth. Green tomatoes were something people ate really regularly. It was tough to grow much else thanks to all the havoc the Dust Bowl was causing on the environment, and by 1936, it was already a period of long-lasting drought and dust storms. Not exactly the kind of surroundings that inspire a lot of vegetable growth. People regularly were dealing with crop failure, and it meant that lots of families had their sources of food and livelihoods cut off from them. Green tomatoes, on the other hand, were one of the few vegetables that people had no issues growing. That's why they got as popular as they did, because eventually, people would begin to hoard them. You'd make basic things out of them like fried green tomatoes with cornmeal coating, but it was enough to last you through the day. Ripe tomatoes were in even shorter supply, and what was available was either rationed or taken up by people in urban centers. It was quite hard for any lasting stock of vegetables to reach people in rural areas, and it was often those people who had it the worst during the Dust Bowl. While macaroni and cheese is often considered the ultimate comfort food, adding stewed tomatoes turns it into something unique, balancing the creamy, cheesy richness with a hint of tangy sweetness. Macaroni and cheese dates back to the early 1700s, with recipes appearing in both European and American cookbooks. The combination of pasta and cheese was revolutionary, and its popularity soared when processed cheese became widely available in the 20th century. By the 1950s, boxed versions made it easier than ever to bring the dish to the table. As for stewed tomatoes, they've been a pantry staple in many households, especially during the harvest season. Stewing tomatoes was a way to preserve the bounty of summer for colder months. When paired with macaroni and cheese, the acidic tomatoes cut through the richness of the cheese, providing a satisfying contrast. While it might seem like a basic dish, macaroni and cheese with stewed tomatoes is the kind of meal that hits the spot every time. Scalloped ham and potatoes, a classic dish that brings together two of the most beloved comfort foods, tender ham and creamy, cheesy potatoes. This casserole has been a staple at family gatherings and Sunday dinners for generations, proving that simple ingredients can create something extraordinary. The dish's origins can be traced back to the mid-19th century, where scalloped potatoes, sliced potatoes baked in a rich, creamy sauce, became a popular side. The addition of ham likely came later, as cooks sought to stretch their budget by incorporating leftover meats. The result was a filling, satisfying dish that combined the savory goodness of ham with the comforting texture of potatoes. Scalloped ham and potatoes became even more popular in the 20th century when convenience foods like canned soups and processed cheese made their way into American kitchens. The creamy sauce, often made from a blend of milk, butter, and cheese, is what binds the layers of ham and potatoes, creating a hearty casserole that's easy to make but feels like a special meal. Scalloped ham and potatoes is the ultimate use-it-all dish, because who doesn't love a meal where everything gets smothered in cheese? It's a dish that's perfect for feeding a crowd and always leaves everyone asking for seconds. Side dishes were once as thoughtfully prepared as the main course, and few were as simple yet elegant as a well-roasted carrot medley. Coated in honey, butter, and a hint of cinnamon, this dish was a staple at homecoming dinners, adding a touch of natural sweetness to balance out heavier meats and casseroles. Carrots were a practical choice for home cooks. They were cheap, easy to store, and available year-round, making them a kitchen essential. Roasting them brought out their natural sugars, and when paired with honey and warm spices, they became more than just a side dish. They were a highlight. Some versions used maple syrup instead, while others incorporated fresh herbs for a more savory twist. No matter the variation, the result was always a vibrant, glossy medley of tender carrots with a flavor profile that felt both nostalgic and indulgent. As processed vegetable sides and microwave steamed bags took over grocery store shelves, many home cooks stopped roasting vegetables altogether. Instead of taking the time to caramelize their natural flavors, People opted for pre-cut and pre-cooked options. Spanish rice with tomatoes and green peppers, a flavorful side dish that has graced American tables for decades. Despite its name, it's actually more of a Mexican-American creation, born out of the fusion of traditional Spanish and Mexican cooking. The rich, savory base comes from simmering rice in a seasoned tomato sauce, with green peppers adding a touch of sweetness and color. The origins of Spanish rice can be traced to the influence of the Spanish in Mexico during the colonial period. The use of rice as a staple ingredient spread throughout Latin America, evolving into countless variations. In the United States, especially during the mid-20th century, Spanish rice became a popular side dish to accompany everything from tacos to fried chicken. The addition of green peppers, onions, and garlic to the dish added layers of flavor that made it even more satisfying. Spanish rice with tomatoes and peppers is the side dish that's just as colorful as it is delicious. So much flavor, it almost steals the show. It's a versatile, easy-to-make dish that always pairs well with a variety of main courses. If one of these meals sparked a memory, drop it in the comments, hit like and subscribe to help keep them alive.